Hello and welcome to TrackVia's tips and tricks with creating a history table with app scripts. Our presenters today will be Derek and Matt, but first we're going to start off with a few housekeeping details. You have started in listen only mode and we ask that you stay in that so everyone can hear the presentation. If you have any questions, please submit them via the chat window and we'll try to follow up with those live after the presentation, and those that we don't get to, we will try to follow up in an email. This webinar is being recorded and we'll send you a follow-up email with the recording within 48 hours. With that, that's all the housekeeping that we need to cover, so I will turn it over to Derek.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I am Derek. I lead our training department here at TrackVia. Looks like we've got quite a few attendees on the webinar today, which is awesome. It's exciting, but I can't say that I am surprised. Whenever I ask clients what topic they want to know more about, app scripts is at the top of that list, right? More often than not, app scripts. So glad to be joined by our resident app script expert, Matt Kruzicki, here today to talk about one of the great ways that you can use app scripts. So I'll turn it over to Matt to introduce himself here, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Derek. Yes, my name is Matt Kruzicki. I think I know probably a handful of those that have joined here. I am a senior implementation engineer, been with TrackVia for a little over 3 years now, and somehow managed to find my way into being the app script expert. So yeah, just kind of fell into that. But yeah, Derek and I will be kind of taking you through looking at a specific use case for app scripts. I think it's a use case that I've used in many accounts, and I think it's gonna maybe open your eyes to the possibilities of app scripts. So I'll let Derek take back the reins here and we will continue.
Awesome. So before we even get to the agenda or anything we're going to be talking about today, I thought we could actually just go through a quick exercise. I would love to get a pulse and hear some of the ways that all of you in attendance are using app scripts in your accounts today. So if you could, head over to the chat of the webinar and just send us a message describing one of the ways that you use app scripts. And it doesn't have to be super descriptive, just a few words or a sentence. And I'll read some of those as they come in. So go ahead and do that. And this will help us just get a feel for, all the different things that app scripts can do, right? Okay, here's the first one. Error messages. Yeah, absolutely, right? So let's say you have a user filling out a form in TrackVia and they don't fill a field out properly. You can use an app script to give them some indication that they need to change their data entry, right? So, yep. To move data from one table to another that is not directly connected. Absolutely. App scripts can be added to tables to provide automation around moving data around your account. That's a great one. Field validation, rounding calculations, history table. Someone uses it for a history table, which is great. But as Matt said, we've done that a lot. To create a next record after a task is completed. Perfect. App scripts can be used to add records to other tables. And that's also something we're going to be doing here today. So more coming in. This is great. But I think that's good for now. Let's hopefully that just shows you that app scripts can be used to do a lot of different things. And as Matt mentioned, creating a history table with app scripts is one of those things, right? So throughout the webinar today, hopefully this helps you realize another useful use case for app scripts. So let's go ahead and move on to the agenda, Matt. Perfect. So first thing we're going to talk about really is just, what is a history table? We'll get on the same page so we all know what we're talking about here. Then we'll talk about the benefits, the value that using a history table can add to you, to yourself, to your users, to your organization. And then we'll get into the fun stuff, right? We'll turn it over to Matt. He'll walk us through an example of a history table so you can see how it behaves, what it looks like. And then we'll kind of take a step back and we'll look at the process that's used to create a history table. So a practical approach to setting one up in your account. Then we'll actually go through that process together. So Matt will lead us on a build session where we actually build a history table. And then we'll wrap things up. So a lot to cover here in the next 45, 50 minutes or so. So what is a history table? Well, quite simply put, a history table is a table in TrackVia that we use to store information regarding changes that have been made to other records in other tables. Okay, now you may be familiar with the record history that's included in TrackVia, in the TrackVia platform, right? You can open up any record in TrackVia, look at it in a form, go to the menu icon in the upper right-hand corner, and click on history. And what that shows you is it shows you a log of every single change that has ever been made to that record. Who made the change, when they made the change, what the values of the change were. It's really granular, it's excellent. This is similar, okay? But rather than looking at it in that history tab, we're basically taking the changes and storing them ourselves in another TrackVia table. Okay, and that allows us to do a bunch of things. Now, there's many flavors that a history table can come in, ranging from more simplistic implementations of it, where maybe there's just a specific field that you really want to hone in on and track the changes against, to more robust implementations where you want to see the entire record version. So you could click into a record and see all the iterations or versions that that record has ever been in. And there's many dozens of ways, you know, between the simplistic and the robust version that you can kind of customize and make your own, right? So that really depends on the requirements and what you're looking to accomplish with the history table, but there are many different ways that you can set this up. Now, who would want to do this, right? Who would benefit from this? We just talked about the built-in record history that's included in the platform, which is great, and it's great for compliance, right? It tracks every change. You can't go in there and change it; it's locked in, and it's great for admins to look at and troubleshoot. But sometimes you might want deeper insight into the change history of a record. You might want to trend it or analyze it, right? There's various things that you could want to do with that. And if you find yourself in that boat, then this might be a solution for you, okay? So now that we know what a history table is, let's talk about the benefits. And yeah, you can just click through all these, Matt, to get them up here on the screen. The benefits of using a history table, rather than just relying on the included record history, stem from the fact that we're taking the data and we're storing it in a TrackVia table. Because once the data is in a TrackVia table, we can use all of the functionality that comes out of the box with tables in TrackVia, right? So it's data in a table, so we can allow our end users to access the data and look at it, right? So that they can see the changes that are being made to the record or have been made to a record. We can take the data and we can report on it. We can make charts and graphs, right? To analyze it, to gain more insight into actually what's happening. What is the user's behavior with these records? How are they interacting with them? You can use the search functionality, the filter functionality, right, to slice and dice that data. Maybe you're looking for a specific day, what change occurred to a record, or a specific person, right? You can search and filter really easily because it's just data in a table, right? And then of course, it's a table, so you can add calculations, you can add triggered fields, calculated fields, you can add app scripts, right? You can do things, you can put formulas in place that you wouldn't normally be able to leverage if you didn't implement a history table like this, okay? So I'm gonna stop talking here. I'm gonna turn it over to Matt, and he's gonna walk us through an example of a history table, so we can just see what a history table looks like. Then we'll talk about the steps. Then we'll talk about, and we'll actually put one together. Okay. So remember, as Matt is going through this, chat through any questions that you have as they come up. Send them through in the chat, and I'll monitor those, and we'll kind of take them as we get them. And we'll also have time at the end for questions as well. But remember that you can definitely send them through. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
All right, so the example that we're going to share with you today is a pretty simple example where we're essentially a car rental agency. And what we're looking to do is track reservations, right? And as reservations change, we're looking to gain insight as to those changes. So we're actually going to be going through two different flavors, like Derek was saying earlier, of a history table. The first flavor is just looking at specific fields, and when the values within those fields change, we essentially want a record created in our history change log. Our second example is going to be a full audit, basically. So it's going to take whatever the values were and stamp all of those values into the change log, such that you can see everything that was changed in terms of all of the values on all of the fields, right? So again, two different flavors. We'll look at both just really quickly for those that are interested, right? The ERD that we're going to be working with is right here. We have makes and models and reservations, and then we have our two history tables. Okay, so if we go back to the dashboard, you can see we have 12 different reservations that exist today, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on an existing reservation, and we're going to make a change. And the change that we're going to be making is, for example, to pickup date. Maybe we're going to push our pickup date back to yesterday, and we're going to save that change. What you're going to see here is an app script that ultimately created a new record, and you can see what changed, right? The pickup date changed. That was the field that changed. You can see that I made the change, and we have the created date showing there as to when the change was made. So that's the first example. The second example is looking at a full audit history, and I actually have the second example here with that app script activated as well, and we'll take you over to those app scripts in a second. This is showing you the full audit. So all of the fields that you see up here are basically being tracked in that new record creation. So these were the values prior to me making the change. So if I were to make another change and push this out and maybe change the model, you're going to see that the previous value is Crosstrek, right? And the previous return date was 4/23, right? And the previous pickup date, and so on and so forth. So again, two examples, both different in their use case and both different from the reporting that you would get out of these. So before we hop over to the reporting, I want to take you into the app scripts. And the app scripts, of course, are going to be living right on the reservation table. So if we go into this table and we look at the app scripts here, you're going to see basically in the first example we're changing the model, and so we're stamping in the model, we're changing the pickup date, we're stamping in the pickup date, and then our full audit history is actually really simple. And I'll get through the details when we actually write our new app scripts when I show you a live demo. So if we go back to the dashboard here and we look at the reporting that you're getting out of this, right? Because that's really going to be a valuable tool for you, as Derek had mentioned. And so some of the reporting that you're looking at here is things like percent of changes by field name, right? So as a car rental agency, I would like to know, where am I making most of my changes? I thought maybe I was making all these changes because people were looking for different models, but in fact, people are changing pickup date more often than they're changing the model of their car, right? Or the car that they're requesting. So this gives me some visibility into, maybe I need to, implement change fees if they're looking to make changes to pickup dates a lot, because it seems to be happening maybe too often or more often than I would like, right? You can also see the number of changes by user, right? So this view basically is showing me who's making those changes. Looks like Derek is making lots of changes to reservations. So maybe Derek needs to, take another training course, or maybe he's, not really inputting the data correctly the first time, and he's always having to go back and correct things, right? So this is kind of calling out maybe a training issue or opportunity. And we look down here at the changes by month, right? This is showing you the number of changes that are happening over time. And so the changes by month essentially are going to give me visibility into my cyclical, business, right? I mean, I can see that I'm, having to, make lots of changes in February. Why? Why is that the case? What's going on there? Is that something that I can plan for, for next year, right? If February is going to be, all kinds of changes people are making, maybe they're canceling reservations, or, maybe whatever they're changing, right? We're tracking all of those changes. So again, this is just giving you some of that visibility into what a change log can do for you with respect to creating records upon change, right? So with that, I'm going to kind of switch gears and come back to the deck real quick. And we're going to talk about how to create a history table. So we'll talk through this, and then I'll actually give you a live demonstration, and we'll actually build our app scripts together. So how to create a history table, right? The first thing that we're looking to do is just define how the table should work. As you saw, we had two different flavors, right? One is looking at just what field is changing, whereas the second option is really giving us a full audit history. And depending on the type, right, is going to, obviously impact the types of reporting that you're going to get out of this, right? So again, identifying the type of change that you're looking to track is going to be important. Step two is creating the tables and fields, right? This is also obviously going to be impacted by the type of change that you're looking to capture, if it is that full audit versus specific field changes. Then we're also going to get into step three, where obviously this does require app scripts, right? You saw earlier, I know I buzzed by it real quickly, the app scripts, but we'll look at that again and write them together. They're very simple, very basic app scripts here, right? So we'll look at how to do that. And again, depending on the type of change we're looking to capture, we'll show you those two versions. Then, of course, we're going to test our app scripts and make sure that when we're editing those records, right, we're getting that record creation in our change log. And then, of course, the last thing, and something I'm sure everyone's aware of, right? Now we've added a new table, right? We're going to have to build views, and we're going to build forms. We're probably going to want to lock down our views and forms, right? Making them read only. We shouldn't have someone going in and be able to change the audit history, right? And then we're going to add those resources to the different various roles that we want to expose to these views and forms to, and obviously add these views and forms to dashboards, et cetera, et cetera. So probably won't get into that as much as, just focusing on building these tables and writing the app scripts and then testing them. So with that, we're going to actually hop back over and do this together. So what we have pre-built already is basically a ERD that is over here, right? It's going to be looking like this when we're done, but we wanted to just have kind of a base there, right? Where we have our makes, our models, and our reservations. So we're going to focus on that first change log where we're looking to do specific field changes. So, you know, when a pickup date changes, right, we're going to track that. When a model changes, we're going to track that, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, we're going to build our table, and we're just going to call this change log 1. And the only field that we actually need on this table is just the field name, right? What is the field name that's being changed? So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then we're going to create that relationship from our reservations table down to our change log 1. So we're going to come in here, do this really quick, and we're going to go back to our ERD, and you can see now we have our first change log, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our reservations table and start writing that app script, right? And the app script that we're going to be writing, yes.
Actually, there's a good relevant question here from Kyle. So I thought this would be a good time to address that. Is there a way to have a history table for multiple tables into one table? So I think, Kyle, what you're asking is one history table, multiple tables populating that single table. So yeah, absolutely. What we're showing you here is just a history table for just the reservations table. But depending on your implementation of it, you could absolutely have multiple tables send data into that one table. Yes. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Matt, but yes, the answer is yes, Kyle.
No, I think that's, yeah, pretty straightforward. Absolutely, you know, it's just a matter of having that as a parent table and easy enough to implement whatever changes you want into the same table. Of course, you'll write your app scripts accordingly, right? Because now you actually have, you know, multiple parent tables. So depending on field names and things like that, but yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our script. So again, we're identifying this as an update script, right? Because we've already established the reservation. We're only looking to track changes after the fact. So we're going to use a before update script here as our trigger event. And the way that I'm going to be writing app scripts right now is just using the actual field names in quotes. We do recommend that, you know, that as best practice, you can certainly do that with, you know, identifying the actual field names in quotes. But we do have app script constants now, which we do recommend replacing your field names with the constants after the fact, just so that you make your app scripts less fragile, right? So if someone were to go in and change a field name, right? If you're using app script constants, right, we don't need to be concerned with that. Whereas we would need to be concerned with that if the app scripts were written with the field names hard-coded in there in quotes, right? So for demo purposes, I'm going to be just using field names, just so you can see what we're actually, you know, writing here. But I would normally replace these with the constants values after, okay? So what we're doing is we're saying if current values, and then what we're going to do is identify what we're actually looking as the change. And so in this case, we're looking at pickup date. So if there's a pickup date and it does not equal the previous values, if I can type here, the previous values of pickup date, right? What we're looking to do is just stamp our field name on that child. So we're going to do an add child function because we're adding it to that change log. The table name is change log 1. The relationship name is reservation, right? And oops. And then the record that we're adding, right, is just going to be the map of or the field that we're looking to stamp in here, right? So we have that field name, and we're going to stamp in just a hard-coded text of pickup date, right? And so what that's going to do is going to create a record in our change log. It's going to create the relationship up to the reservation, and the value that we're stamping into the field name is going to be pickup date because that's what's changing. We would do the same thing for our model. And so what we're going to do here, and we can do this for all the fields, I'm just going to demo the 2. right? So we're going to do our model, and our pickup data is identifying the two fields that we are interested in capturing here. So that's it, right? Those are our two app scripts. And again, this is specifically calling out that when the pickup date changes or when the model changes, we're stamping in model or we're stamping in pickup date into that field name.
Two good questions coming through in the chat, which I can take, Matt, while you're looking at that. One from Jacob. Did the app script that was shown before account for multiple changes at the same time? We have users that will change 15 to 20 fields in a single save. So we showed two examples. The first was if you change the pickup date or the model, create a record in that child table. That's what Matt is building here. In that case, it would be multiple entries. So Jacob, you would end up with 15, 20 entries. The other example that we showed was Matt made several changes to the record, which created one child record that had the previous values in there. Ultimately, Jacob, it's up to you how you would write the script and what you want it to do. It could do both. It could do either one, whichever one makes sense for your implementation or your requirements. The other question that I'm seeing is from Sam, asking about how to find constants. So Matt, I don't know if you just want to show real quick how to get to the constants. That should be good.
Yeah, so the constants is over here, and really what this is doing is it's using the underlying integer of the field, and so you can change the field name without actually breaking your app script. Because if I were to change pickup date to like pickup dates, in terms of the field on the table, this part of the app script is not going to work because it's not going to see pickup dates. It's looking for pickup date. But if I use the constants for pickup date, what I would do is I would go over here to the table that I'm looking for that value, which is our reservations table. And you can see pickup date here is, I'm going to just copy this and I'm going to paste it over there. And then what I can do is I can actually replace all of these pickup dates with my constants, right? And I'll actually run this as is like that, and it should work the same as the other one. So now if I were to go in and change the pickup date field name on the table, this app script won't break, right? It's not fragile because it's looking at the underlying integer ID that backs up that field name. All right. So let's go ahead and give this a whirl. So again, the two fields that are going to create records, or two fields that would create a record on change, are going to be pickup date and model, right? So if I come back and we look at our reservations table, and we were to come into our reservations table as an example and click on one of these, and I obviously have not built out my forms and my views, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to change both the pickup date and we're going to change the model, and what you're going to see is two records are going to get created or should get created. So I'm going to save this, and there's my two records, right? So the field that was changed is the model, and the field that was changed here is the pickup date. Those are the two that I've identified in my app script, right? So again, to Derek's point, and to the question that was asked, in this instance, every change, at least that I've identified in my app scripts, creating a record for a change is called out. So even though I'm in one instance of an edit on the reservation, it's creating two records because I've changed the two fields that are creating these records, right? Our second example is going to require another or a different table. And technically, it wouldn't require a different table, but we're going to use a different table for demo purposes. So what we're going to do on this one, because we are actually looking to track a full audit history, I'm actually going to just make a copy of this table. And so by copying this table, I'm actually going to get the same field names that are just going to be able to be stamped in with the values from the reservation parent. And so in this case, we're going to just call this our change log 2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to establish the relationships here, and the relationships are going to be from our reservation down to our change log 2. And we're also going to create a relationship from our model. This wouldn't necessarily be required, but again, we're going to just do this for ease of demo purposes. So from our model down to our changelog2, and then you'll see that our ERD looks similar to the one on the left. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go work on the app scripts again in that reservation table for our second example. So in our second example, what we're going to do here, oddly enough, even though we're creating more records or more fields, the app script itself is actually much simpler. What we're going to do, since we're really looking to capture any change, is we're going to map our change log. So we're going to create a map, and we're going to use, and you can use an add child here. I'm just going to use a save just to show you a different flavor. But what we're doing is we're going to save a record in that changelog2 table. So again, we're identifying the table name, then we're identifying the values. And since we're looking for the full map of that reservation, we're just going to take the previous values from that reservation. So that encompasses all the fields from that reservation prior to the change. And then we're going to call out our app name here in the save function. And we do that. That creates that new record. And then we need to link this record back to the reservation because we're not using an add child function here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this change log that we've created, and we're going to establish the relationship back to the parent simply by doing current values, right? So this is the relationship back to the parent. This is the map of the parent. So we're just setting that relationship to the current record. We'll go ahead and save this.
Hey, Matt, we've got a question from Michael.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to address this. Can you use the constant in the map that you provide in the add child function? So I think Michael is asking about where it says pickup date or model in one of those. Can you put a constant in there?
Oh, this right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this case, we're looking to actually stamp in text, right? So this is actual text. It really doesn't have anything to do with the field name. So in this case, we wouldn't use constants, but we could certainly use constants for field name, reservation, and the table.
Perfect, thanks, Matt.
Okay, so we're gonna come back here and we're gonna go in and test this. So again, we're on a reservation. We're going to click on this reservation again. You can see obviously this is my changelog1. My changelog2 didn't exist prior. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a change or make a couple changes. Maybe I'm going to change the customer's name, right? Maybe I'm going to change the return date. Maybe I'll change the pickup date and the model. We're going to just make every change possible, right? And we're going to save this. And you're going to see those two records get created for the change in the model and the pickup date on our first change log. And on our second change log, you're going to see all of the previous values. Remember, my name was weird, the pickup dates, the original pickup dates, right? The reservation parent is there, the model parent is there, and then obviously these are the new values. So this is showing the entire previous record prior to my change, right? But it is only one record creation. So again, there's the difference there. Whereas, we're calling out specific fields in this case, so we get a record for each. In this case, it's one record just showing you the previous values, okay? I think that about wraps it up for the demo. I don't know if someone's monitoring questions here, if we want to address any additional questions or if we want to continue forward with the presentation.
Yeah, let's see what we got for questions here. Question from Fran, Matt. If there are two environments, QA and production, for example, will the underlying field IDs and constants remain the same? And if not, do you have a suggestion for best practices in this situation?
Yeah, so I know, Fran, with your setup, and I want everyone to be clear here on the difference between a QA environment, which I think, Fran, you're referring to, versus a sandbox environment, right? Most people have the sandbox feature, and so with a sandbox feature, when you create a new sandbox, you will get all of your app scripts copied over, and all of the underlying integers in your constants will remain the same. Now, one thing to be a little bit careful with there is if you start building out additional tables and fields in your sandbox environment, and then someone else is adding fields in your production environment in the meantime, you want to be really careful about copying over your app scripts from your sandbox into production, because those underlying field IDs might not actually be the same, right? Because you're adding fields in sandbox that don't exist in production. Someone else might be taking up those integers in new fields that they're adding in production, and now you have a misalignment of field IDs. So something to be careful with migrating constants, app scripts from sandbox to production. But as far as a separate environment, right, a completely separate account, as in like a QA environment or a QA account, which I know a few clients have, it's not that common. In that instance, right, you are dealing with two completely different accounts that have different account numbers, that have different, app names. And so in that instance, right, you're not going to see that same alignment. Now, if you're replacing, like taking a production environment and replacing that environment over the top of a QA environment, then obviously I think it's going to work similar to how a sandbox works today, right? Where you're basically just taking a copy. And so everything still should be in alignment and intact.
One more item to note on that is if you're using the promotable sandbox feature, right? If you do build a new table with app scripts in the promotable sandbox and then promote that to production, that would work well, right? Because you're getting the same table with the same IDs in production. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we're locking down production in that instance, so no one could be adding fields while you have a promotable sandbox. So yep.
Let's see. We've got another question from Catherine. How does this work with linked tables or nested tables? I think, Catherine, you might be referring to, you can correct me if we're wrong here, but it sounds to me like, yeah, in this case here, where if you wanted to track the history or the change log for multiple tables like makes, models into reservations, I think this is kind of a nested model or linked model. And it really just depends on what you want your requirements to be. App scripts are really flexible, and if you want multiple tables to send their information into that reservation table, it's just a matter of putting app scripts on all those respective tables and building your history table in the correct way. So whatever your requirements are, it's likely doable there. Okay. All right, we've got about, I'd say, 5 minutes left here. So Matt, why don't we flip back to the PowerPoint? I'll kind of just go and wrap things up here. And then if anybody else has any questions, feel free to send them in now, and then we'll get to them at the end here. So I hope this demonstration of using app scripts as to populate a history table is helpful. Of course, it's not a full training on app scripts, right? If you do want more information on how to use app scripts, how to write app scripts, we've got resources for you. We have a new on-demand course for app scripts. Head over to the TrackVia University website to check that out. And we've also made improvements to our AppScript documentation page. That's at developer.trackvia.com. There's a lot of great resources there, examples of AppScript use cases, all documentation on the bind variables, and everything that you could want is on that page. So definitely check that out. Of course, if you have questions, you can reach out to support. They're there to help you Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain. And if you have more robust implementations that you need to do with AppScripts or with anything at all, remember, we're here to help you, right? We don't ever want you to feel like you're stuck. So if there is something more complex, you can reach out to our professional services team. They're great. Of course, Matt is a great member of that team. And those range from, small engagements of just a couple hours to more complex full application builds. So we're here to help. Pencil it in. The next webinar that we're going to do is at the end of May 26th. And we're going to talk about creating clean, dense, and valuable dashboards. So how you can create the best dashboards possible for your end users. Finally, we will send out a recording of this webinar shortly, and there will be a survey. So if you have 2 seconds to fill that out, we really appreciate it. It helps us improve the webinars. So let's see. I think we may have answered all the questions that came in. So if nobody has any other questions, I think we'll call it for the day. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.